That's basically how this all came about. And the blog itself is a way to help creatives and everyone that's struggling in a very dehumanized system learn to survive by leaning into the humanity and not giving up their humanity.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to think about. In terms of real estate, you are right at the crux of people's most important life decisions on a regular basis. Who is an incredible writer, director, producer. He's created a business blog, would that be the best way to describe it? And
Yeah.
called Corporate Zombie Survival Guide, which I think everybody in the entire world probably needs. Many of you who know me know that I come from a background of doing theater and film and being a producer, director, and writer myself. And so this is particularly exciting to me because I think that there are a lot of you out there who probably are like me, artists at heart, who have always been suspicious of the corporate world, who have always felt like they were giving up if they were not doing their art 100% of their time. And I will tell you this, the most important thing that has occurred for me over the past 27 years as a top producing realtor while doing all this other work is that learning the business world and learning how it ticks is going to help you in your art. It's going to help you understand people. It's going to help you to be authentic in situations where other people may not be. And authenticity is your superpower. So let's talk a little bit about you and how you got to where you are, and talk to us about this Corporate Zombie Survival Guide. I love it.
Great. And I appreciate that introduction. And I think more people need to understand that to be a creative is very powerful. And we need more creatives in really being able to leverage that talent in the corporate world or in business too, because they need you. And so how did I get started? I always wanted to tell stories. I'm a musician and a writer. And so I tossed around the idea of doing one or the other and needing to focus and struggling because they're both very difficult careers, but really loved creative fulfillment in both areas. So I managed to marry the two in moving pictures, right? So I started when I was in college, even though I was an English major, I worked for PBS as a paid intern, learned a lot about TV production through PBS. My first regular job, that wasn't a contract, it was a series of contract jobs because it's not easy out there when you first graduate. The first regular full-time job in entertainment was at ESPN. I was a production assistant and I rose up within 6 months to be an associate director for them in their international division. And after working really fast and growing quickly in that, I realized that there was only so far I can go as a 24-year-old, having gone that quickly up the ranks. And it took so much of my time. I wasn't able to make movies and do the other things that I really wanted to do creatively and express myself. So I started my own production company. And at first I was niched a lot doing work for Madison Square Garden, a lot of sports. Eventually that segued into doing, through friends and connections, I started doing a lot of infomercials for medical people in Palm Springs, and which paid really well, but it was not exactly my dream job in some ways, but I was bringing a value to people and helping others. And then eventually I started doing a lot of journalism and writing a lot of screenplays and then doing some short films. And then one thing led to the other where I got a few full movies distributed. And one was an Academy Award, not Academy Award, I'm just an Amazon Award winning film. I won an Academy Award one. And then the other one is now on there. It's a comedy horror called Hell's Kitty, which is currently on Amazon, which you can see coming up for Halloween. And that's what really led to, so while I was doing this, I was working a lot of what we call in the business industrials, or doing a lot of business type videos for corporations. And it's because the industrials paid really well. We recently went through a pandemic where a lot of Hollywood was shut down. So all of my productions, when it came to documentaries, other projects, films I had in development, were basically on freeze. And so the only thing making money for my production company was industrials, right? And so because I saw what was happening in Hollywood and I saw how things are shifting in the entertainment business, I realized I needed to make sure that a real large portion of our income for my business came from doing these industrials, placating to the business world and doing creative ways to tell stories and teach people about products and services and things like that. And that's basically how this all came about. And the blog itself is a way to help creatives and everyone that's struggling in a very dehumanized system learn to survive by leaning into the humanity and not giving up their humanity.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to think about. And in terms of real estate, you are right at the crux of people's most important life decisions on a regular basis. And you're there to be not just a trusted advisor, but also you are a salesperson, or you are a listing coordinator, or you are someone who is handling the physical aspects of that particular sale. But you're also dealing with somebody who's either lost a spouse, has decided to downsize, whose kids have gone to college, who are having another baby, who have lost their job, have gotten a job. You're always there at major stress points in people's lives. And it's super important to remember that the truth and authenticity and being exactly who you are right at the crux of doing the best job you possibly can. So I love what you're doing there. And it's funny how product placement and industrials and how many of us are inured to the way in which advertisements flit in and out of our lives. And there isn't a lot of difference in some ways between narrative content and documentary content. I actually have been reading a lot of Gregory Bateson recently. He wrote this great book called Towards an Ecology of Mind, a series of essays. And he talks a lot about how it's the relationship that is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what the subject matter is, doesn't matter what the discipline is. Transdisciplinarity is absolutely key. And so, in terms of if you are not a corporate zombie yourself, but you're being forced to intersect with them, you need to realize that you are just as valuable as they are, and you are absolutely integral. I loved how Bateson described how it's not five fingers, it's the relationship between all of the fingers. That's the thing that you want to look at in life. That relationality, I guess is a word, is the important thing. And I think you have really honed in on something that's very important to our world right now. We're heading into some very choppy waters with the incredibly stupid decisions that are being made in Washington. And consequently, we're all going to need each other a lot more than we ever have before. We're going to need I would say that collaboration and collectivity and integration and all of those things that have to do with meshing of things is going to become the absolute currency of our lives, because we can't rely on our normal media systems. We can't rely on our normal sources. The research is being stopped. Education is being affected. So we're all going to need each other a hell of a lot more. And so this is utterly timely. When you are working on this blog, where do you get your source material? How do you go about doing it?
I think about what I've been experienced. So I think a lot of when I'm creating, I'm filtering things through my own lens, right? Through my own experiences. So I think we all do that and a lot of extent, and some people are more conscious of it than others. So when I go through life and what I perceive as problems arise inevitably, right? I'll start thinking from the perspective of why, and I'll keep asking that why to get to the root cause of the problem, right? They call the 5 whys, or keep asking whys, root cause analysis. I think I've done some work for people in risk management, and that's what they call that. And it's getting to the root cause of the problem, right? And when you do that, you don't just ask what or how or where or when, but you actually step back and ask why. You provide the deeper level of what you're talking about, the relationship of me to that problem and the world and everything around me and where it's coming from. And then you start to filter that through this lens of empathy too with others. And in doing that, I think, well, okay, for example, I have a friend who's been struggling with retirement, and they thought it was one thing and they didn't have enough. And now they feel like they still need to work, and it's a scary thing. And then worried about Social Security and Medicaid cuts and things like that. So one of the articles in the blog is all about retirement, and don't let them leave you for dead. What I do is it's subversive, but I play with the metaphor of if we were in a zombie apocalypse, the survivalistic mindset that would take over, the complete change around us that is so drastic when everything's decaying and changing so rapidly, and the desire to have to just survive the fear of the other people around you as you compete for limited resources, what you perceive to be limited resources.
Right.
I say it that we are all dying to live, and as a result, we're living to die. And I feel like the zombie metaphor, and the reason why it's so popular in our culture right now, and it continues to be extremely popular. I just looked at The Walking Dead. They have spin-off series. These things are in like 10 plus seasons, every one of them. And then The Last of Us recently, a video game. So young generation also finding a way to the whole zombie genre. It is perpetually being recycled. It is super popular, more popular now than ever. And I wonder, why, right? Because our stories reflect what our fears are and what our hopes and dreams are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So essentially, then I investigate and explore all the problems we have and how do they stem from being dehumanized, being isolated from our systems, from the fear that is driving us to the point where we will literally destroy ourselves and everything around us, and how that impacts businesses and our survival.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had the incredible pleasure to take a class this summer called The Art of Transformation.
Mm.
And in that, my professor had a 70-30 rule. And the 70-30 was that we would spend, and she's what's called a utopian scholar. She literally studies utopia for a living. She travels all around the world, going to different Indian reservations and far-flung places to study what people perceive as utopia. And so the 70-30 rule is 70% solution, 30% despair. And it was something I want to adopt in my life because I can tend to get very depressed about what's going on in the world and seeing things that we've fought for so hard are being eroded. But if you can be part of the solution around that in a positive way, I think it's utterly important. And I think the metaphors that a society takes on, like zombies, is a very interesting and telling thing. How are we going to keep our humanity in the face of AI? How are we going to keep our humanity and our authenticity in a world that is becoming more and more fascistic? How are we going to combat the negativity that is being spewed all around us? Today is 9/11, and I want to bring that up because this is a great day to remember heroes, real heroes who without any sort of ego involved went out to try and save people. I've been watching on the news because of that Kirk fellow. That was his name, right? It was it Kirk,
Yeah. Yeah. The gentleman who was assassinated recently
the fascist who got killed. And
Yeah.
he had terrible, horrible, awful, antithetical views to anything that I personally believe in. But of course, he should not have been assassinated. What a terrible thing. That's not going to solve anything. The escalation of violence in the world that we're seeing, how do we combat that in our daily lives? And the way to do that is by embracing our humanity and by embracing our empathy and embracing our kindness. Kindness. I am bringing that up in relationship to your blog because I think we need a kindness revolution. I think we really do. I think that's the thing that's gone out the window, in this every man for themselves world that we're in right at the moment.
Yeah.
And with the pandemic, a lot of the connection that a lot of us normally had went out the window, and it's been hard. We've been finding our way back to each other in a really weird way because it's almost like walking on the face of the moon. You don't quite know how to do it. It's not over. And there's all this unkindness out there. How do you protect yourself? And how do you stay safe and at the same time continue to explore and maintain your curiosity? That's super key. I love what you're doing, Nicholas. I think it's a beautiful, amazing thing that you're out there in the world putting this together. And where are all the places people can find you?
Yeah. CorporateZombieSurvival.com is where you'll find all the articles. You can join the free newsletter where I summarize and let you know about new future events and any speaking events and things I'd be doing. And then most of the social media links are conveniently placed within that. We have a newsletter on Substack as well. And I'm pretty findable under Nicholas Tana. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all the typical if you find me. You can look for my movies. Hell's Kitty is currently streaming on Amazon.
Yeah.
comedy horror, which I was in with most of the horror icons from the 80s, all making a debut. Everyone from Adrian Barbeau to Michael Berryman to Doug Jones, all the late Lee, to Lee Merriweather as well, and
Oh, lovely.
just a host of horror talent. And yeah, so you can find that there. And I find horror is an interesting thing. We're going into Halloween season, right? And
Yeah.
and horror is a way of people being able to, in a more fun, safe way, face their fears, but under a level of control, or at least perceived control. But you've mentioned a few things and some really recent tragic event, and they're happening all the time, all around us. And the news allows us to be able to see this. But in reality, this, whether it's happened more or less than back in ancient Rome or whatever, I don't really know. I don't know of the data on that. But our perceptions right now, because we have technology that allows us to see everything,
Right.
naturally, as people that focus on what can hurt us or make us scared, we are going to be more likely to focus on what's scary, what feels like is missing in our lives, what feels like is threatening to us. And we're going to perceive the people we feel as threatening as perhaps even worse than what they are, or as constantly a threat. And so I take that. I think that's a great way to understand human nature. And it's a great way to understand how other people think. So by going and imagining that you live in a zombie apocalypse, we're not that far from that mentally in terms of how we perceive the world. And so as real estate agents, going back to more specifically your audience, with AI and a lot of the decisions being made by people that a lot of them can be corporate zombies, they are positioning us in a way where there's a lack of respect for things that are human. That includes everything from imagination to real creativity to empathy. Seen statements by people saying that, oh, empathy is bad. I saw it recently. I think it was Elon Musk.
Yeah, I know.
Like to even come to the conclusion that something like empathy could be bad without more nuanced understanding is just shocking to me, actually, because I feel like it's the opposite. We can't even empathize anymore, and we lack the imagination to do. And I feel like if we are to survive in any industry,
Yes.
especially real estate, where it's a very relationship based. I recently bought a home in Redondo Beach. I went through this process. I'm a homeowner twice over. I can say, what made that process easier is that the person actually empathized with me in my situation and understood where I was coming from. And
Absolutely.
I felt better having them in my tribe. I felt them better in my team. Just like from in the zombie world, like if you're alone out there, you're going to eventually get eaten. You have to find the tribe that will help you and find sanctuary.
Great. Yeah, no, it's really true. And that's the thing I was talking about, how embracing your authenticity, embracing kindness, embracing empathy, embracing all these things that only human beings can do is
You mentioned kindness a few times, and I want to be fair with that. I think you're absolutely right. But it's not always easy to be kind because we come from our own perception of things, and human beings aren't always kind. We know that, right? Human beings can be mean, they can be harsh, they can be angry, and all those, what we might perceive as negative, as well as loving and caring and sacrificing, all that. They can be all those beautiful things too. We have to accept that's in all of us. And from there, we can have empathy for those that we might perceive as angry or wrong, right? To me, that humility is lacking too. And that dives into the other aspect of what is human. To be human is to err. To be human is to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so empathy comes from recognizing that and then allowing that in our lives, where we focus on perfection. And a friend of mine was talking about how every email now is like a press release because they're using ChatGPT. I'm like, yeah, true. And she was saying like how, well, isn't that so fake? And I'm like, yeah, on some level, but on another level, the English major in me loves that everything's correct. The other thing that loves is that they care. They actually care enough to want their communication to try to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that says a lot too. Yes, if it took them 2 seconds to do it, then maybe not as much of a commitment. But I think we have to recognize the positive sides of things too. And if we lean into our humanity, there's a lot of opportunities to come together and to do that in real estate and everything.
I will never take over anything because AI is not going to be humanly creative. It may ultimately be creative in a machine way, but the reality is that I told this anecdote the other day before. I'm in grad school again. I'm getting my PhD like an idiot, and I was late because I'm a 90-hour-a-week realtor too. I was late getting an annotated bibliography together for a class that I'm taking. And so I asked AI to do it for me. And it came up with a perfect list. It was absolutely perfect. I was like, oh my God, look at this list, these amazing books. And then I felt guilty because I don't ever cheat on anything. And so I looked up the books because I thought I better read at least a paragraph of each one.
Half of them are made up.
All of them were made up.
Yeah.
And so I got upset and I asked AI, why would you lie to me like that? And it said to me, because I wanted to please you. So that was a little scary.
The sociopathic part of AI. Yeah. But the interesting thing about AI, and I find some sources are better at sourcing that kind of thing than others, but it's excellent at being able to look and find things, but it will make things up. And so AI does err too, because it is a human tool. But at the same time, I think when it comes to recognizing error, and that's a part of our lives too, I think that's really important to have that patience. I think that is still something that we have to recognize in each other, so we're not so perfectionistic and we allow for mistakes, because sometimes mistakes take us in new directions. And you mentioned creativity. One thing that's really interesting about the zombies is if they succeeded in turning every human being into one of them, where would their food supply go?
Hello?
Have you ever seen a zombie procreate? No, they are not capable of doing it. They're walking dead. Humans can procreate.
That's the double
Humans
blind.
can create.
Yeah.
And AI can't create. It is taking and turning from information we've put there and churning it out and deriving. It's derivative form of art and a derivative form of information. And so it will always be 2 steps behind me, because I will be ahead of it through imagination. Now, I know there's a whole group of people in Silicon Valley that will argue that and say that, yeah, maybe now, but maybe to some extent it will get to a level where we might not notice it in large level. But I do believe that if you are truly imaginative, you will know the difference, and that you will understand and have more respect for the power of the human imagination on such levels. And yes, maybe 90% of what we put out there won't require that, but there is a large portion that will, and we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. You have been just an utterly stellar guest today, and I am
Thank you.
so happy to make your acquaintance. And I definitely want to reconnect offline, because I see our own goals and things are very intersected in so many ways. I'm really looking forward to seeing all the work that you put out. And I really think that even though this was not primarily relating to real estate exactly, what it was relating to was being human and taking that next step into your own authenticity. And I think that is crucially important for everybody involved in my profession. So thank you very much, Nicholas. I so appreciated having you on my show.
Thank you, Andrea. I really appreciate it. Let me know when it comes out, and I hope to keep in touch.
If you loved hearing from these incredible voices shaping real estate, you'll want to catch what's next. Click the video on screen to keep discovering more inspiring stories.